sister forged my name on our mother's deed, and I didn't find out until a Tuesday morning when a stranger called me from a title company. I was at work. I'm a licensed practical nurse. I work night shifts at a long-term care facility outside of Columbus, Ohio. I'd just gotten off a double. I was still in my scrubs, sitting in my car in the parking lot eating a granola bar because I hadn't eaten in 12 hours. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Is this Paige Merritt? Yes. This is Donna Holt from Cornerstone Title and Escrow. I'm calling regarding a property transfer in Whitfield Lane in Gahanna. I need to confirm. Did you sign a quitclaim deed last month transferring your ownership interest to Amber Merritt? I stopped chewing. I'm sorry, what? She repeated it. Slower this time, like maybe I'd misheard. I had not misheard. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, that I had never signed anything, that I hadn't even known my mother's house was being sold. There was a pause on her end, the kind of pause where you can feel someone recalculating what kind of phone call this has become. Ms. Missaneth. Merritt, she said carefully, I think you need to speak with an attorney. I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes. I didn't call my sister. I didn't call my mother. I just sat there, still in my scrubs, granola bar forgotten on the passenger seat, trying to understand how my own name had been used to take something from me that I didn't even know I had. Let me back up. My mother bought that house in Gahanna in 1997. She was a single mom by then. My dad had been gone since I was 4. My sister Amber was 2. Mom worked as a bookkeeper for a small construction company for almost 30 years. She wasn't rich. She wasn't even comfortable, not really, but she paid that mortgage every single month for 23 years, and when she finally paid it off in 2020, she cried at the kitchen table. I was there for that. I remember she opened a bottle of sparkling cider she'd been saving and poured it into 2 mismatched wine glasses, and we toasted to nobody being able to take it away from her now. She died 14 months later. It was a stroke. Fast. She was 61. She was healthy as far as we knew. She'd been complaining about headaches for a few weeks, but she thought it was her sinuses. It wasn't her sinuses. She went to bed on a Wednesday night, and she didn't wake up on Thursday morning, and my sister found her because I was working a shift, and Amber happened to stop by that morning to pick up a sweater she'd left. That's the version Amber always tells. How she was the one who found her. How hard that was. How traumatic. I've heard her tell it at least a dozen times, each time a little more dramatic, each time with herself more at the center of it. I was the one who handled everything after. The funeral home. The death certificates. You need more of those than you think. The bank accounts, the utilities, the notifications. I took a week off from work with no pay because I had no PTO left. I arranged the burial. I wrote the obituary. I picked out the casket, which is something that nobody tells you is one of the loneliest things a person can do. Amber showed up for the funeral in a dress I'd never seen before, which meant she'd gone shopping sometime between Mom dying and us burying her. She cried very publicly, very loudly. People kept coming up to hug her. I stood next to my aunt and accepted handshakes, and I did not cry. Not there, because I was still in task mode. I cried later, alone, in my car at 2 a.m. after I'd finished cleaning out Mom's refrigerator so nothing would spoil. Mom's will was simple. She'd had it drawn up in 2018. I found it in a fireproof box in her closet along with her birth certificate and the title to her car. Everything split equally between me and Amber. The house, whatever savings remained, the car. Equal 50-50. I didn't dispute that. I wouldn't have. It's what Mom wanted. What I wanted was to sell the house, split the proceeds, and be done with it. Amber said she wanted to stay in it. I said we could talk about her buying out my half. She said she didn't have that kind of money right now, but she would get it, just give her time. So I gave her time. 6 months, then 8, then a year. She was living in the house rent-free. She'd changed the locks without telling me. I found that out when I went to pick up some boxes of Mom's things I'd stored there, and my key didn't work anymore. When I called Amber about it, she said she'd had to change them because a window had been broken, and she just hadn't gotten around to giving me a new key yet. I should have pushed harder. I didn't, because she was my sister, and my mother had just died, and I didn't have the energy to fight about a key. I should have gotten a lawyer then. I know that now. Instead, I let another 4 months go by. I was working doubles to cover a staffing shortage at the facility. I was tired in a way that gets into your bones. The house felt like a problem I'd deal with when I had more capacity to deal with it. Meanwhile, Amber was living in it, not paying rent, not paying me anything for my half. Just living her life in our dead mother's house like the whole thing was already settled. And I guess in her mind it was. Because what I found out after Donna Holt's phone call, after I finally scraped together the presence of mind to call an attorney named Gary Schuster who handled real estate disputes, what I found out was that Amber had gone to a notary 5 weeks earlier with a quitclaim deed. A document that, if signed by both parties, would transfer my half of the property to her. My signature was on it. I hadn't signed it. She'd forged it. The notary had stamped it without verifying my identity in person, which was a violation in itself. And the deed had been filed with the Franklin County Recorder's Office. On paper, as of 5 weeks ago, I no longer owned any part of my mother's house. Gary didn't sugarcoat it. "This is deed fraud," he said. "It's a crime. But you need to move fast. Because the longer this sits on record, the more complicated it gets." He told me to file a police report immediately. He told me to send a certified letter to the recorder's office disputing the deed. He told me to document everything, every text, every voicemail, every email where Amber had discussed the house or money or the buyout that never happened. I went home that night and I sat on my kitchen floor, not the couch, the floor, I don't know why, and I went through 2 years of text messages between me and my sister. What I found was a paper trail that Amber apparently hadn't thought about. Texts where she'd asked me to just be patient a little longer. A text from 8 months ago where she wrote, "I'll have your half sorted by spring, promise." A voicemail which I had saved by accident, where she'd said she was working on getting financing to buy me out. All of it documented that she knew there were 2 owners. All of it contradicted any claim that I'd voluntarily signed anything over. I filed the police report on a Thursday morning. The officer I spoke to, a young guy who looked like he'd just gotten out of training, was very matter-of-fact about it. He'd seen this before. "More common than people think," he said. "Family members. Almost always family members." I hadn't told Amber any of this yet. Gary advised me not to contact her directly, so I didn't. I just let the process move. What I hadn't accounted for was my aunt. My mother's younger sister. I'll call her Renata. Had always been closer to Amber. Not in a dramatic way, just in the way that some family dynamics form. Amber was louder, funnier, called people more often. Renata called me on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after I'd filed the police report, and I could tell from her tone in the first 3 words that Amber had gotten to her first 3 words that Amber had gotten to her first. "Paige, honey, I just think before this goes any further, Renata. She's family. You're both grieving. Your mama wouldn't want Renata," I said again. "She forged my signature on a legal document and filed it with the county." There was a silence. "She says you'd agreed to it, that you'd told her she could have the house." I want to describe what it feels like to hear something like that, to hear your own sister has told your aunt that you'd agreed to give up your inheritance, that you'd simply forgotten or changed your mind, or were now being difficult for no reason. It feels like the floor dropping. Not dramatic, not movie falling, just that quiet lurch where the ground was there and now it isn't. "I never said that," I said. "I have 2 years of texts proving I never said that. And I have an attorney. And I have a case number with Columbus PD. Renata didn't call again after that. Amber did, though. 3 days later, on a Tuesday night at 10 p.m., while I was getting ready for a shift, she called 4 times back to back. I didn't answer. She texted, "We need to talk." Then, "You're making this into something it's not." Then, I thought we were family. I forwarded everything to Gary. The investigation took 11 weeks. What they found, in addition to the forged deed, was that Amber had contacted at least 2 real estate agents about listing the property. She had gotten a comparative market analysis done. The house had been appraised at around $280,000. She'd been in preliminary conversations about an offer. She had, in other words, been planning to sell our mother's house, pocket the full proceeds, and I don't know what she imagined would happen when I found out. Maybe she thought I wouldn't. Maybe she thought by the time I did, the money would be gone and there'd be nothing left to do. She was charged with felony deed fraud and forgery. In Ohio, that's a third-degree felony. She was also charged with theft by deception. The value of my half of the property put the amount well into felony range. Her attorney, she hired one, of course, argued that there'd been a miscommunication, that Amber had genuinely believed I was on board. The text didn't support that. The real estate conversations didn't support that. The fact that she'd never mentioned any of this to me in any of our communications definitely didn't support that. My attorney filed a separate civil suit to have the fraudulent deed voided and restore the title to its correct state, co-ownership, 50-50, as Mom's will specified. That was resolved before the criminal case even went to trial. A judge reviewed the evidence, found the deed invalid, and restored my ownership interest. It took 4 months and cost me approximately $3,800 in legal fees that I paid on a nurse's salary while working doubles. The criminal case went to a plea hearing. I was not required to be there. Gary told me I could choose not to come. I went anyway. I need you to understand that I'm not someone who does things for drama. I took a personal day, drove to the Franklin courthouse, sat in a row behind the prosecutor, and waited. Amber walked in with her attorney. She was dressed nicely, blazer, hair done. She didn't look at me when she came in, not once. I thought about the last time we'd been in the same room, which had been at a cousin's birthday party almost 2 years ago, before I knew any of this, when we'd eaten cake at the same table and she'd laughed about something on her phone and showed me a video of a dog. Just normal. Just sisters. The plea was entered. Third-degree felony forgery, guilty. The theft charge was reduced as part of the agreement. The judge, a woman, mid-50s, glasses, very still in the way that people who've seen everything tend to be, reviewed the terms. She asked the prosecutor to summarize. She asked Amber's attorney if his client understood the implications. She asked Amber directly if she was entering this plea voluntarily, and whether she understood what she was admitting. Amber said yes. Then the judge spoke for about 4 minutes. I'm not going to quote her because I can't remember it word for word. What I remember is the tone. It was not angry. It was not dramatic. It was the tone of someone explaining something very basic to someone who should have already understood it. She said something about the particular nature of this crime, that it wasn't a stranger being defrauded, it was a sister. That the property at issue was a family home left by a deceased mother. That forging a family member's signature on a legal document to deprive them of their inheritance was not a miscommunication. It was a choice. The room was quiet. Amber was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay my legal fees in full, the $300 plus additional costs. No jail time, which I'll be honest, I had complicated feelings about. Gary had told me probation was likely given her lack of prior record. I understood the logic. But sitting there, watching her walk out with her attorney, I'd be lying if I said I felt like it was completely even. What I did feel, the thing that actually settled in as I drove home, was that it was over. My name was back on that title. My mother's wishes were intact. Whatever Amber had planned to do with that money, she hadn't gotten to do it. We sold the house 8 months after the plea hearing. A family bought it. Young couple with a toddler and another one on the way. The realtor told me they'd fallen in love with the backyard. My mother had spent years on that backyard. Hydrangeas along the fence. A little stone path she'd laid herself one summer. I'm glad someone is going to love it. My half came out to $134,500 after fees and closing costs. I put most of it into a high-yield savings account. Some of it I used to finally replace my car, which had 190,000 miles on it, and an air conditioner that hadn't worked in 2 summers. I haven't spoken to Amber since the courthouse. She sent a text about 2 weeks after the plea. Short, no apology. Just, I hope you're doing okay. I read it, put my phone face down, and went back to what I was doing. There's nothing to say that the judge didn't already say better than I could. My Aunt Renata sent a card at Christmas. A regular Christmas card, nothing about any of it. I wrote her back. I'm not interested in burning everything down. My mother loved her sister. I can hold that. But I think about that phone call from Donna Holt sometimes. How close I was to just not knowing. How easy it would have been for that sale to close before anyone called me. How the whole thing could have happened and I might not have found out until it was too late to do anything. I think about my mother paying that mortgage for 23 years. I think about her at that kitchen table with the sparkling cider and the mismatched glasses. I think about how proud she was. She worked her whole life for that house. It was the one real thing she left us. My sister looked at it and saw money. I looked at it and saw my mom. That's the difference, I think. That's always been the difference. I used to think the hardest part of losing my mother was the grief. I was wrong. The hardest part was finding out that the person who was supposed to grieve alongside me had been busy calculating what she could take. Amber didn't do what she did because she was broken, or sick, or acting out of some momentary panic. She did it because she believed she could. She watched me work nights, watched me handle every piece of paperwork after Mom died, watched me extend deadline after deadline without complaint. And she read all of that as weakness, as permission. She thought that because I was tired and quiet and hadn't pushed harder about the key or the buyout, I wouldn't push at all. That's the thing about people who cut corners their whole lives. They start to believe that everyone else is also looking for the easy way out, that nobody actually plays it straight. So when Amber sat down with that forged deed, I don't think she felt like she was stealing from me. I think she genuinely believed she was just moving faster than I was. What she didn't account for was that I'd been moving the whole time. Just differently. I'd been documenting without knowing I was documenting. I'd been building a paper trail through 2 years of ordinary texts, ordinary conversations, ordinary back and forth about a house we both owned. Every "just give me a little more time" she sent me became evidence. Every voicemail she left about financing she'd never actually pursued became evidence. She handed me the case herself, one message at a time, because she never imagined I'd need it. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the fraud, not the courtroom, not even the money. It's that the truth was just sitting there the whole time in my phone, waiting. I didn't have to manufacture anything, or fight dirty, or become someone I wasn't. I just had to tell the truth and let it be seen. There's something in that I think is worth sitting with, not as a lesson in a tidy sense, but just as something real. Amber spent months constructing a lie, and it collapsed in 11 weeks because the truth required almost no effort to prove. She put all that energy into deception, and it got her a felony record, 200 hours of community service, and a debt to me she's now legally required to pay. I put my energy into working, grieving, and eventually, when I had no choice, into telling an attorney what happened. And I got my mother's house sold the way it was supposed to be sold, to a young family who fell in love with the backyard Mom spent years building. I'm not going to pretend the outcome felt perfectly fair. 3 years of probation is not nothing, but it's also not what I felt in my chest watching her walk out of that courthouse. There's a version of justice that satisfies emotionally and a version that satisfies legally, and they don't always land in the same place. I've had to make my peace with that. What I can say is that the part that mattered most, my name back on that title, my mother's wishes intact, my half of what she worked her whole life for, that part was made right. The $134,500 is sitting in a savings account. My car has air conditioning now. I sleep when I'm not working, which sounds small but isn't. I think about what it takes to do what Amber did, to look at your own sister, someone who arranged your mother's funeral, who wrote the obituary, who paid for the casket on a nurse's salary, and decide she doesn't deserve what she's owed. I don't understand it. I don't think I'm supposed to. But I do understand this. What you do when nobody is watching, when you think you won't get caught, when the other person is too tired to fight. That's not a small thing. That's who you are. Amber showed me who she was, and the court made sure there was a record of it. I'm okay. I'm more than okay, actually. I just wish it hadn't had to be this way.